Hello, welcome to this course HNS 307 Research Methods. My name is Dr. Kivuti Bitok, and I'm going to be taking you today through the topic of characteristics of good research topic. I know you have had the introductory bit by the course coordinator, and the expectations of this course is that by the end of the 45 weeks, we'll have at least developed a proposal, draft 0. And one of the things we expect from that proposal is that, or draft proposal, is that it should be of good topic. Okay, so we focus on research questions and justification of the study for this session. Let's still remember the research architect and see where we are at. Remember, in the previous lecture, we looked at problem statement. So today we want to formulate the specific research questions. We want to focus on justification of the study. Later on, we'll look at objectives and hypotheses, the study design, study population, data collection, analysis, report writing, and dissemination. So the objectives of this lecture, we want to be able to describe research questions. We want to be able to explain the importance of research questions, examine the factors considered in formulation of research questions, describe the 3 levels of research questions, explain framework utilized in formulation of research questions, and examine examples of research questions. And then we'll be able to share the assignment of the week. So, remember, we said that the research problem is developed from the gaps which were identified during the research. So we said the research problem statement and research questions are basically developed from looking at the gaps which were identified regarding your area of interest, and you identify that majorly through literature review. So a research question is basically a question that the researcher needs to answer. It has to be clear and asks the relationship or seeks to find out the relationship which exists between 2 or more variables. It has to be very concise, and it helps us define the focus of our research project. That research question must be very specific, because once it's specific, then it is able to guide us on how to manage and analyze our data. In summary, just to recap, a research question is usually a statement in form of a question. You develop it through identifying the gaps in your research area interest, and it's a question that the researcher needs to answer. It must be clear and should ask the relationship that exists between 2 or more variables. Just to be very concise. It helps us define our research project, and it must be specified before you begin your data analysis. Why is it important? The research questions set boundaries and help you know where to go next. The research questions also defines what data you need to collect, and it determines the methodology and hypothesis of the research. The research question also identifies which method you will use to access your data, and it provides an indication of how you will analyze your data. Remember, a well-defined question identifies the theoretical construct you want to learn more about, describe the phenomena, and that research question is what will guide your literature review, because you want to review literature in a cogent and logical structure. Remember, the research questions often transit the data used to conduct the research, and it draws attention to the significance of the research. The research question should be stated in such a way that it has capacity to surprise the researcher. It should be able to encourage complex answers, not a yes or no response. It should be able to give us a chance to explore more. So if you're going to make sure that the research question gives us the capacity to surprise, then what are some of the considerations we should have when developing the research question? 1. Is the question of interest to the researcher? Don't waste a whole year doing a research of an area you're not interested in. So find something which is of interest to you. Then ensure you develop research questions which are measurable. And they should be very specific. You should ask yourself whether your research questions include the predictor variables and the outcome variables. When you're writing your research question, you need to ensure that your sample is included, and you need to identify the study area, as well as ask yourself if the study is feasible or relevant. So if you never remember any of those 8, let's see whether we can remember just something small, an acronym which will remind us what makes a good research question. Let's make it FINA. What does FINA stand for? FINA is an acronym which stands for visible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. We'll go through each of those words and see what we actually mean. If it is feasible, we want to ask ourselves whether the study is cost effective. You do not want to go and access the knowledge, attitude, and practices of cervical cancer screening in the whole of Kenya. Do you have money for that? Not really. So we should be able to ask ourselves whether we are able to meet the cost of doing that research. Are we able to recruit enough subjects? Supposing you wanted to look at the mothers who are over 55 years, for example. What is the probability of finding them? What would you expect to be the numbers, for example, in Kenya of mothers who deliver past the age of 55? You need to ask yourself whether there's availability of study subjects. Do you have the technical expertise to do that research? And do you have enough time to do the research? So even as you choose your topic, and remember, you need to defend that report at the end of next academic year. Make sure you do a project which is achievable within that period of time. The research should be interesting. Is it interesting to you? Is it interesting to people who might give you money for research? Do you think it's interesting to your mentor or the person who you'll be allocated to supervise you? Is it interesting to the research or scientific community? Do you think it's interesting to the society? Is it interesting to the public who did make a news article, whether in social media or wherever? But you need to ask yourself, is it interesting? Do you have passion about it? Is it novel? More often than not, we may not be able to do a totally original idea. However, research is incremental. So it is okay to build on what others have done. And research can confirm or refute very important findings. As long as we have a more rigorous study design, maybe focus on new population or new technology, then we'll be saying that the research question is novel. The other thing to ask is it ethical? We need to be able to balance the risk and benefits to participants, whether those risks and benefits are physical, psychological, emotional. And then we want to make sure whatever research we do is beneficial to the society or study population of the profession. While we may not be able to pay the participants financially, maybe the information we generate could be used to improve the overall performance of healthcare sector, for example. Remember, your proposal will pass through the Ethics and Research Board, so it needs to be ethically sound, and there are guidelines which have been given by the ERC of KNHUN, which will be handling your proposals. Find out what specifically they're looking out for. Then there should be clear communication on risk and benefit to the participants, and persons are free to choose to participate or not. That guideline or outline, which has been developed by KNH, has a template for seeking consent from your participants. It actually does cover all of these aspects, and that is why I keep referring you to that guideline. The research should also be relevant. Relevant to who? To the population that participates. It should be relevant for public health policy. It should be able to improve patient care. It should be relevant in terms of scientific knowledge. It should also be relevant in future research. And it should be relevant to your program and institution. I have met students who've been very interested in a specific area, and they did a proposal in their undergraduates. They went ahead and developed another proposal in the same area, or allowed their research to grow in that particular field during their master's level, and they have actually covered it in their PhD. And so that becomes very relevant not only to you as the student, but to you when you will be a career professional out there in the field. How do we write the research question? We'll start by noting that the research question has two main parts. It should have a stem. Remember the stem which has the W's, it's not just the what. The stem could have any of the W's, what, where, who. And it must have a topic. Give you an example, what is displayed. What nurses wear white uniform? Those days, people used to wear serious white uniforms. So today we could ask, what nurses wear flowered scrubs? Just thinking. But in generally, the reason why we say the research question should have one stem and one topic is because you want to simplify. You want to make it as simple as possible, and it also makes it to be action-oriented, which means we're demanding some action. We are asking active questions. And remember to avoid yes and or no questions. Let's see some of the stems you could borrow from when we are writing a research question. Here are some guiding examples. What is the nature of nursing care in the pediatric unit of KNH department? How does nursing care in pediatric department differ from nursing care in orthopedic department? What are the functions of the chief administrative officer of a medical department? And you can imagine many other examples. And we have some of those terms, and you can think of what questions you'd be able to formulate using those few examples. Let's see just one or two more examples just for clarity. Supposing we knew that mastectomy has an effect on women. Let's just say, and if we said, does mastectomy have an effect on women? The answer would be yes or no. Let's try and put it in a researchable question, and would ask, what are the reactions of women to mastectomy? That tells you that question demands some answers. You need to go and get in touch with women who've gone through mastectomy, and you need to ask them, what were the experiences? How did they react to the same? Second example, age has an effect on fertility. That is just a declaration. You could even ask, not very well formulated, but does age have an effect on fertility? And the answer would be yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. Let's try and put it in a researchable question and say, what is the relationship between age and fertility? That tells us you need to go and get a group of women or men, and to be able to analyze or generate their data on their age and then their fertility levels, and be able to analyze statistically and see whether there's a relationship. Is it positive? Is it negative? And then number 3, just an example probably of a research question which was relevant quite a few months ago. What factors influence acceptability of COVID-19 vaccine among women of reproductive age? I don't know whether you remember during the COVID pandemic, there was this myth in the country, and especially among the women, that once they received COVID-19 vaccine, then they had their menstrual cycles altered. Others said, their fertility was affected. Was it true? Was it a myth? How did it affect the acceptability of COVID vaccine among women of reproductive age? And that was one of the research topics of some of the students who finalized last year. But we just need to ask ourselves relevant questions, interesting questions, and make sure that those research questions demand some action for us to be able to get the answers. We have many other questions, and you'll be able to read more about it. But let's just look at 2 more, because more often than not, this is one area we have students getting challenged in. We have a research question. What are the effects of malnutrition in Africa? What do you think about that research question? Pause, look at it. Remember the characteristics of good research question, which we discussed earlier. Does it meet the threshold? Okay, let's try and see whether we were able to identify similar thoughts. When you look at that research question, it is too broad. Would you be able to look at the malnutrition in the whole of Africa? And then the effects of malnutrition. Is it financial effect? Is it growth? Is it on intelligence and academic performance and so many other things? So that is too broad. Let's look at another one. How does childhood malnutrition relate with academic performance in elementary school children in Kajiado? Wow. Is that a more acceptable research question? Does it meet the threshold? Let's see. One, it indicates the data which will be collected. You need to look at malnutrition data, and you also need to look at academic performance. You're very specific in elementary schools in Kajiado. At the same time, even though it indicates that you're looking at Kajiado is very wide. So probably you'll be able to focus in maybe Sinya or just a small part of Kajiado. And it gives you an idea of what kind of data will be analyzed and discussed. And you can think of how that question can be improved. Let me state, and I know this is, some of those things we say it's nice to know, but it would be nice just to mention that we have different levels of research questions. And for this course, we'll probably just focus on quantitative research, because quantitative has more varying types of research, levels of research questions. And I know we'll be focusing on it later in our course. But for now, I just want to mention the three main levels of research questions in especially quantitative research. You'll find others who've talked about 4 levels, but let's talk about 3 because most scholars agree on those 3. The first level is a descriptive level. This level of research question, which is the lowest, just want to establish or find out whether a phenomena actually occurs. For example, what is the level of malnutrition in Wajir County? Or what is the level of literacy? So you're just basically describing the variable of interest. Then we go to the second level of research question, which is relational. Now, in this case, we are asking ourselves whether there is any relationship between 2 variables. So we want to look at the differences between 2 or more groups. For example, we look at the performance of students who attended the virtual classes or these recorded classes versus the students who attended the physical classes. And I'd probably be interested in finding out, was there a difference in performance between the 2? Then the level, which is the third, will look at causal. So what contributes to the difference in the relationship? If I found that there's a difference in performance between the students who came for the recorded lectures and those who attended the physical lecture, then I would be more interested in, so what is causing this? Is it that the students who came for the physical lectures benefited from probably the non-verbal communication? Is it that they were able to pay attention more? They were able to look at the lecturer and listen because we are not using their phones on WhatsApp, for example, and will be able to see that. So remember, level 1 is the least superior. In order of priority, in order of superiority, level 3 is a more superior research question compared to level 2 and 1. So when you're looking at your research, you need to ask yourself what level of research question you're interested in. Let me take a few minutes and just mention something which I think is important, and I know you'll need this, especially when you come for your master's, but there's some of those things which are good to know. When we want to ask ourselves whether we have included everything in our research question, we use a few guidelines, a few examples, a few frameworks developed by different authors, and they will be able to read more about them. In quantitative research, we want to ask ourselves, and of course, remember this depends on the level of question, whether we covered everything we need to while stating that research question. So we're asking ourselves, have we followed the PICOT framework well PQUAD basically is an acronym for a few things. The P stands for population. Have we identified the population or the problem? Have we indicated the intervention? What is being studied? Have we documented the comparison groups, the outcome of interest, and the time frame of the study? While in qualitative research, we may use PEO. You're asking what is the population being studied, what exposure to pre-existing condition are we talking about, what is the outcome of interest. Okay, well, this is just a nice to know, just for you to think about. And well, I may not really expect to go to every detail of it, but I need you to apply it as much as you can. Just a few examples of a research question. Let's try one with a bad, one with good. And the first one asks, how does social media affect undergraduate students' behavior? Quite broad. Let's see whether we can improve on it and say, what effect does the daily use of WhatsApp have on the attention span of undergraduate nursing students at the University of Nairobi? Since we started watching this lecture, how many of you have sneaked to go and look at the social media accounts? I may not say hands up, but I'm sure if you're to be honest with yourself, you know that also affects your attention span. Let's see example number 2. Has there been an increase in traumatic experiences among nurses in Kenya since COVID-19 pandemic? Yes or no? That would definitely give us an yes or no answer. Let's try and see whether you can improve on that and ask, how have counseling intervention programs and change in working hours affected the rate of traumatic experience among nurses working in medical departments of KNH since the COVID-19 pandemic? I think that answers quite a number of the PQUAD questions or PQUAD aspects. Okay, so remember the previous topic was on research problem, and today we talked about research questions. I want you to go and look at the differences between the two in terms of definition, their nature, how does it apply in quantitative or qualitative research method, and whether it can be able to guide methodology. In a nutshell, remember, the research problem looks at the gap. The research question looks at the same content but in a question form. Research problem focuses on the issues or gaps that are analyzed and discussed, while the research question usually looks at how to explore a research topic. In quantitative and qualitative research, it doesn't matter whether we have qualitative or quantitative research, we need not consider the same under a research problem. When it comes to the research question, we ask the question based on whether we are looking at qualitative or quantitative forms of research design. Remember, while research problem may not determine the methodology, the research question helps us determine the methodology and the hypothesis of the research. In the next few days, we'll be looking at how to formulate hypotheses. So let's just mention that the research question also guides hypothesis of the research. Okay, just a small thing to mention. What is justification of the study, which is also part of the problem statement? Remember, we say the problem statement should be able to guide on what needs to be done and why it is important to do that specific study. So, justification basically answers a few questions. How does the research relate to the national or regional priority? Is it important? What knowledge and information will be obtained? Are you going to generate any information, anything new? What is the ultimate purpose that the knowledge obtained from the study will serve? Will that study or the result from that study benefit patients or advance understanding or influence policy? Will the outcome of that study fill gaps in existing knowledge or resolve current controversies? And then, how will the results be disseminated? And who and how will the end results be used? Will they be beneficial to anyone? Who are these beneficiaries of your research output? In summary, remember, writing your research questions is one of the first things to focus on when you begin your research journey. Your question basically identifies your contribution to research. Therefore, it must be robust and it must be able to produce robust results. Remember, good research questions scaffold your entire research and keeps you excited about the whole journey. As usual, we need to practice. And you can only be able to get it right when you practice more, and especially now that you're practicing with knowledge. Remember, your research question is your research purpose stated in one simple comprehensive sentence. It must yield hard facts which will help solve a problem, to be able to produce new research or add theory, improve practice. Remember, whatever the results are should be facts and not opinion. Once you write it, it should be able to guide the research process, construct a logical argument, guide you on the literature review, help you plan the thesis chapter or proposal chapters, and devise efficient search strategies. Okay, let's bring this to an end and say a good research question identifies the theoretical construct, traces the data, and has recognizability, is significant, should be robust, and has capacity to surprise. I want you to take the next few days and develop a research questions for your proposal and justification of your research. Thank you.